Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Next Best Picture podcast, where I am being joined right now by the composer for Robert Eggers' Nosferatu, Robin Carolan. Robin, thank you so much for joining us here today.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, thanks for having me.
Man, I don't even know where to begin because this is a very, very interesting project because of the history behind it. We're talking literally over 100 years at this point of Nosferatu, Dracula, just being a part of cinema in and of itself. Not to mention the material that it's all based on and how far back this all goes here. So when you get told that this is going to be a project that you're going to be working on, do you feel the weight of that expectation? Not to mention directed by Robert Eggers, who already has this tremendous amount of credibility behind him with his previous features.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, Nosferatu, the original it's like cinema history. It's like iconic.
Mm-hmm.
So, um, yeah, you definitely feel that weight, I think, in a good way, though. I think it's a real don't mess this up type situation. I mean, I'm sure like everyone goes into any film with that kind of attitude. You always want to sort of do a good job, but I think with this one especially, yeah, it's something that people um really cherish, and you don't want to create something that potentially ruins that or upsets people. I think also, I mean, like, before Rob and I ever started working together, I've been friends with Rob for quite a long time, and we would talk about Nosferatu constantly. His
Mm-hmm.
ideas for it, why he wanted to do something, why he wanted to re-envision the story, how he would re-envision the story. So, it's something that I know is really important to Rob, just as a filmmaker. I mean, Nosferatu has kind of been his creative DNA. It's one of the reasons why he is a director. So when it finally got greenlit and it actually happened, it was all a bit surreal. But I remember just thinking, like, okay, yeah, like I need to really do the best job I can and kind of not just come through for people who are such huge fans of the original, but also for Rob. And hopefully, hopefully I did. But yeah, it was definitely, I felt the weight. Yeah.
So going that far back then in terms of your relationship with Robert, how different is the score, the final score, from what you originally conceived of that many years ago in talking with Robert? Or was it always what you imagined it would be?
It's pretty much how we kind of imagined it would be. I mean, I knew like Rob wanted to, if he ever got to do Nosferatu, I knew he kind of wanted it to harken back to, like the gothic horror melodramas of the 40s and the 50s. So I knew the score would kind of need to be quite bombastic, I guess you could say, quite melodic at times. Like it definitely wasn't going to be just like a vibey score,
Mhm.
which is probably, I mean, the Northman score is probably a bit more like vibes because it's just so much drones and, like weird sounds. So yeah, it didn't really change much. That's kind of what it was, and that's kind of what it's ended up being. I think also, I mean, I read Rob's original script for Nosferatu a long time ago, and I think
Mhm.
when we came to finally work on the film, because I'd sort of been able to sit with the script for such a long time and had so many conversations with Rob, I had a really clear idea as to how I would approach these things, which obviously just really helps, especially when there's a lot of music in the film, and it definitely helps to have pretty clear ideas as to how you're going to do all of that,
Yeah.
in advance.
No, absolutely. I want to talk about certain themes here for certain characters and such too, because it's one thing to create a mood and an atmosphere, but I also think too this is a story where the characters are really well known to the audience, and so the music has to evoke a certain type of sound pertaining to the character that the scene is focused around, right? So let's kind of look at, I guess, really the titular character himself here, played by Bill Skarsgård. What was the direction that Robert gave to you in terms of what he wanted that aura to sound like? Because I'll tell you, every time he's on screen, it's so compelling and so magnetic. It's a combination of overall visual presentation, but then the auditorial element too, the sound design team and your work as well, all coming together to create this magnetic whole that we, the audience, feel just as much as Lily Rose Depp.
Right, yeah. Okay. Well, that's good. I mean, Orlok has a theme that reoccurs throughout the film. I mean, in terms of sort of like feedback from Rob, what he wanted, he he kept it kind of vague, but I think part of the reason why is because I mean, Rob and I have a lot of like very similar interests, and our sensibilities are generally quite similar. So I think Rob at this point can sort of trust me to sort of know what he will want without him really having to sort of give me like a huge essay on that. But the only thing I knew was he wanted something that like the theme needed to be simple because we knew that the theme would kind of reoccur throughout the film, but it would need to kind of be like in terms of mood constantly sort of changing, and
Mm.
it was important to write something that was simple enough that you could keep sort of like reinventing it, if that makes sense.
Hmm.
Um, I knew also like he kind of wanted the theme to have a little bit of a nod to, like the Hammer horror films, um, which I tried to do and, like tried to do it in a way that felt appropriate for this film because a lot of like Hammer horror scores are amazing, but they're very much like of their time. Um, but I mean, but also like aside from there is like the Orlok theme, but there is also there's like a motif, like a spiral sound
Hmm.
that I had the orchestra play, and that was a really big part of the score because even though that's kind of more, it's not really a theme, it's more just sort of like an experimental technique, or just sort of like a sound that you hear. It was really important that be in the score because this as soon as you hear like the strings play the spiral, you
Hmm.
know that even if Orlok isn't in that scene physically, he is there. So
Yeah.
it's constantly kind of signaling like his presence and the way he's infecting moments, even when you can't physically see him. And yeah, the spiral sound, I just wanted it to be hypnotic, but also really queasy and disorienting, kind of like a breaking down of, I wanted it to kind of be like a breaking down of reality. So, you're kind of thrown into this sort of like dream logic uh, type space, which is what happens anytime Orlok is present, effectively.
Yeah. And it's also interesting too, because even though this is very much steeped within Gothic horror, you also have to balance it with some other genres too. There's thriller, there's also a romance, well, if you want to call it that
I mean,
exactly.
I think it is. I mean, a very fun,
Yeah.
but sorry, I'm not sure if I have to swear, but yeah,
No,
it's
it's
a
okay.
very messed up romance.
Hmm.
I mean, that's how I wrote the last 10 minutes of the score, like the ending, which is just
Yeah.
sort of like one long track. I mean, I wrote that to sound sort of like a messed up wedding track, so yeah, I'd say romance is on point.
Yeah. No, absolutely. What would you say was the piece of music that you kept coming back to time and time again to rework it and try to get it just right?
Um, Orlok's castle, the approach. So effectively, when Hutter is in Transylvania and the carriage comes to meet him, uh, and then we see Orlok for the first time, even though he's like off in the distance. That was like a really hard track to write. Um, I think partly because I knew Rob wanted a lot of dynamic changes. So kind of getting from A to B to C, within not very much time was kind of a challenge. But I think also it's just like, that scene in, well, whether it's Nosferatu or any period correct Dracula, it's, that approach to the castle is just such an iconic movie scene. And,
Mm.
the music has to really, um, it has to be powerful. You have to really kind of like evoke something. Like you can't just sort of like have it be vibey and like cool or whatever. So I think, yeah, that for me was like one of the hardest scenes to write to because I just really, really wanted to nail it. And it was tricky, that scene changed a lot as well. There was a lot of like editing because I think again, in the same way I wanted to sort of like nail the music for that scene, I think Rob and Lou, who were like editing the movie, everyone really knew how important that scene was. So it went through a lot of changes.
Yeah.
But hopefully, it kind of hopefully it works. I think it's also that's the scene where you're really suddenly in this completely different world. We're
Mhm.
not in like the real world anymore, and you need that to come through.
Where did the idea of the music box come from?
I mean, I think I was just responding to the script and the footage. I mean, when we meet Ellen for the first time, I think she's supposed to be 14,
Hmm.
uh, 13 or 14. Um, and the house she's living in, I mean, there's a shot where you see the house, she's sleepwalking outside of it. It kind of looks like a doll's house. So I think I just responded to what was there and kind of felt like there needed to be this sort of like childlike sound. And also, I wanted it kind of needed to sound innocent because then
Hmm.
obviously what you can do is you can subvert that. So, it's like the film starts in this completely sort of innocent place. The music needs to sound like that. But then, of course, you can creep all these things in and start to really like curdle that innocence. And that's essentially, one of the things the film is about. Um, and I also, from really kind of from the get-go, I wanted the score to bookend the film. So the music box motif that starts the film, it's also how the film ends. It's there in that last shot. And I
Hmm.
really wanted to do that from the get-go because I guess I just wanted to kind of bring the story full circle, with the music.
Yeah. Your previous film credit, as mentioned earlier, was The Northman. You're an accomplished musician. You know what you're doing. But with only two film
Not
scores,
always.
I have to know though. I'm just curious. In terms of the world of film scoring itself, what for you was like the biggest learn from The Northman that you took with you when you headed into Nosferatu?
I mean, everything. The Northman was like baptism by fire. I mean, not just for
Mhm.
me. I think everyone who works on that film felt the same way about it because obviously, I mean, Rob kind of tends to work with the same people, so it's very much like there is a team of people, and yeah. But obviously, before the Northman, Rob's films had been like pretty, low budget, so learning how to make something on that kind of scale. I mean, literally, I learned everything from that film, and it wasn't always very easy. I can't say it was always like a fun experience, but I had to. It was my first score, so I really had to learn on the job. And uh, again, it wasn't always very fun, but I don't know if I could have gone into something like Nosferatu if it hadn't have been for all the stuff that went on with the Northman. Um, I think, I mean, one of the hardest things to learn is you have to keep a lot of people happy. It's not just about the director, it's about the producers and, like the editor. There's so many people that you have to to kind of keep happy. And I think kind of learning how to sort of walk that line, I think is really important. And also, I think you have to kind of find a way to not take. You might write something that you think is like the best thing in the world, and you think, "Oh my God, that's if it, you know." Even though I wrote it, that's really beautiful. I love this, and you have to kind of learn that if it might be like the most beautiful thing, but if it doesn't work, you have to learn to kind of like not take it personally, and also and kind of let it go, which is yeah, it's quite that can be quite hard.
What was that
But it's,
quote I heard recently? A piece that would bring Beethoven to his knees or something like that. That was
oh
something I heard that
yeah,
get thrown around recently in terms
it's
of
in the script. It's in Rob's original script. There's a moment in the film where yeah, I mean, I won't say what the moment is because it will give it away, but there's a moment where it just needs to the music has to be like going and yeah, but it was literally written into the script.
Mhm.
So yeah, I mean that was intimidating because
I was going to say, it seems
those are
like your
quite big
friend
words.
is deliberately messing with you when he writes something like that almost.
Yeah, I mean when I read the script, I was like, okay, that sounds challenging. Thanks for
To put it
setting me.
lightly.
Yeah, I mean, uh, hopefully I got there a little bit. I'm not sure. Like, we'll see what people think, but yeah,
Oh, it's awesome for the record.
like
Like
big words.
I love the vibes of this movie so much. I love that it's both, as I said earlier, like blending all these different genres. It has a classical feeling to it, but also too something that I think, and you could tell me a little bit about maybe the collaboration with the sound team, the way that the sound work of the film incorporates its way into your score, and it just creates this, like I was saying earlier, this overloading sensory experience that is never grating, but also at the same time unnerving is the word I'll use. Like it's just very suspenseful throughout and creating just this atmosphere of dread. I know you mentioned earlier collaborating with people, having to please everybody, but can you tell me a little bit about the insight into what it was like working with the sound team and how they collaborated with you to create just the overall sound of Nosferatu?
Yeah, I mean, we had to work pretty closely together, because I knew that Rob wanted this film to have kind of like wall-to-wall music, really. I mean, I think there's like 10, 15 minutes in the film where there isn't music. So I knew he wanted a lot of music, and I also knew he wanted a lot of bombastic music. There's a lot of like melodic stuff. So when you know that, but you also know that like the sound design is also just as important. Like Rob really wants the sound design in any of his films to be super detailed. You have to, try and write all this music and this big music, but try and sort of think, okay, how do I leave room for the sound? And yeah, it's not always easy. It's definitely a challenge. Um, you know, but I mean, again, like, the sound people on this film with the sound people on The Northman. So we're used to working with one another, and it's just, it's a lot of it is just about sort of, you just have to sort of be open to compromise, and you kind of have to know that it's, me making the music and them doing the sound, they have to complement each other for the greater good. They can't kind of be like you never want to feel like they're in competition because then it just
Mhm.
becomes like a bit of a racket and it's not what you want. And again, like it's great to hear that, you feel like these two things have sort of come together and have created that sort of tense dread because that's what we had to do.
Yeah.
Uh, but again, it kind of has to be in perfect sort of like it's like a bit of a dance. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So yeah, we just worked really closely together and just kind of did what was right for the film at the time. So sometimes music kind of takes a sacrifice, sometimes sound takes a sacrifice, but you just you kind of work these things out really.
I know we're coming up on the end of our time here, so I want to try my best to get in these last couple of questions. When the title card appears, and that's meant to provide the audience with a jolt, jump scare esque moment, um, how do you go about just writing music that is going to create that feeling within an audience? Is it just doing a lot of high pitches? What is it that goes into a moment like that?
I mean, for that scene in particular, I mean, basically, I just envisioned, I just wanted it to sound like an orchestra exploding. And that's kind of what, so I mean, it is musical, like it's kind of like, it's notated, but a lot of it is, yeah, it's also kind of experimental, and you have to sort of really direct the orchestra to play in a certain way. Yeah, I mean, that scene and the music that's there, it really is just the sound of an orchestra, like, 60 string players, 10 horn players, percussion, 40, singers, just all going for it.
Mhm.
Uh, yeah, I mean, yeah, an orchestra, everyone playing in sort of like unison in that way. I mean, it will kind of jolt you.
Yeah, absolutely. Are
Yeah.
there any nods to any of the previous Nosferatu films that are in this score? If not, it's totally cool. I'm just curious though.
There is there's probably a little bit of a nod in one of the scenes, more so kind of like to the Popol Vuh soundtrack for the 70s, the
Hmm.
Herzog version.
Yep.
They used a lot of drones on that score, and I definitely took a bit of inspiration from that and sort of did a bit of a wink wink uh, for some people, who will notice that sort of thing. But no, I mean, generally, I mean, to be honest, I tried not to watch either versions too
Hmm.
much or listen to the music that was related to them, because you just don't want to sort of like get in your head about it or accidentally kind of you don't want to kind of accidentally end up making something that sounds too similar, I guess,
Yeah.
um so no, not so much. There's a nod in the score that I very deliberately put in to the Innocents, like the
Oh, okay.
yeah,
Yeah.
the ghost film. Um, just because that's one of my favorite films ever, and also Nosferatu, even though this is about, a vampire and not ghosts, The Innocents is like one of the well, if not the best gothic horror melodrama ever made. So
Hmm.
yeah, I definitely snuck in a few sort of references to that film in this score, which
Love
I'd
it.
be see if people pick up on it. But yeah.
All right. And then my final question before we go here. What are you most proud of now that the score is complete, film's out in the world? I think the reception is going to be pretty strong for it.
Yeah, hopefully. Don't know really. I mean, it's just, I mean, to be honest, it's still all a bit surreal that we've even sort of done it. I think everyone feels a bit kind of, pinch me, the fact that, because Rob's been talking about wanting to do Nosferatu for so long, and it felt like at certain points it was just never going to happen. Um, but luckily, everything kind of aligned, and it has. I think, yeah, I just feel really proud that I was able to kind of be involved in something like this. I don't sort of take it for granted. It's really mad. So yeah, I hope people just really enjoy the film, and I hope that they can see the level of craft that went into it, because everyone really, really tried their absolute hardest to kind of bring this thing to life. So yeah, just proud
All
to have
right.
done it. Really.
Well, Robin, we're very, very happy for you. The film is awesome. I can't recommend it enough. Thank you so much for your time here. Really, really
Yeah,
appreciate it.
yeah, no, it's really good talking. So yeah, thanks a lot.
Take care.
Yeah, you too. Bye bye.